The story begins with Bakshin, also known as the Duke of Death, playing piano under the moonlight. Tragedy struck him when he was just 5 years old as a witch cursed him for reasons unknown. Though he can't recall why the witch cast the curse, he remembers her last revelation, that he would lead a life of misery. As the curse took effect, all living things he touched met a swift end, forcing him to live alone in a distant mansion. One fortunate day, Alice, the daughter of his former head maid, arrives at the isolated mansion and chooses to live with the Duke while serving him as a maid. Playfully, she teases him to see his innocent reactions. Flustered, the Duke confesses that he fears he may succumb to temptation, putting her life in danger. Yet Alice remains undeterred and continues her efforts to care for him, even if he rarely shows appreciation. Alice then informs the Duke about the arrival of his childhood friend Philip. The reunion is far from what the Duke expected, as Philip looks at him with fear. Before leaving, Philip reveals that his mother wanted to know about his condition. Meanwhile, the Duke's family discusses giving his inheritance to his younger brother and cutting all ties with him. Later, in the silence of the night, the Duke vows to marry Alice one day. The following morning, the Duke's superhuman butler, Rob, returns from a leave of absence due to a back injury. Overwhelmed with eagerness to work, Rob's health suffers, leaving Alice with all the household duties. Meanwhile, the Duke works on composing a new psalm, hoping to earn a living as a songwriter if his parents disown him. However, Alice interrupts his writing, prompting him to share a special song he created exclusively for her. After a nap, the Duke resumes his work, but is disturbed by his younger sister, Viola, who barges into his room. Despite initial frustration, they engage in a chat. Viola notices her brother's feelings for Alice and advises him to break the curse to return home. Once Viola leaves, the Duke gets back to work, but a black cat hinders him, reminding him of his curse. However, the Duke discovers the cat is abandoned like him and helps it find a new home. Later, under the young full moon, the Duke dances with Alice while keeping a safe distance. One fine morning, the Duke playfully challenges Alice to a game of pool with an intriguing twist. The loser has to fulfill any request from the winner. Alice cleverly distracts the Duke and wins the game. Later, they head to the town festival together. Worried about mishaps, Alice gives the Duke a steel armor. But among the bustling crowd, the Duke gets lost and finds a crying lost boy. To cheer the boy up, he plays a song on a piano he discovers in the town square. Surprisingly, the crowd starts dancing to his music. Eventually, the boy is reunited with his mother, and Alice finds the Duke. As night falls, the Duke and Alice climb a tall clock tower where Alice shares the sad tale of the festival, celebrating the marriage of the princess and the moon. The princess, betrayed by a jealous witch, offers a kiss to the moon every year on the day of their supposed wedding. The Duke realizes that his story is the opposite. He loves Alice but can't touch her. However, Alice is content staying by his side and makes him promise to always be close to her. A few days later, the Duke takes Alice to watch a meteor shower by the lake. The atmosphere becomes tense as Alice asks the Duke to kiss her, even if it means her death. However, the Duke refuses, unsure of the consequences. The following morning, Alice begins to distance herself from the Duke, prompting him to suspect that his behavior during the meteor shower might be the cause. Eager to understand the reason behind her actions, he tries to inquire, but Alice brushes off his concerns. Abruptly, he comes to realize that Alice is suffering from a fever, likely a result of the events from the previous night. Filled with concern, he tends to her and discovers that she had felt a chill while observing him sleep. As winter arrives, the Duke, usually immune to the cold, is surprisingly scared of it, but Alice convinces him to step outside and enjoy the snow. Together with Rob, they build a snowman and have a snowball fight. Later, the Duke comes to Alice's aid in her quest to find her lost earring. During their search, a figure from Alice's past, the enigmatic witch named Cuff, emerges at the mansion. Cuff, who was once acquainted with Alice's mother, exhibits her awe-inspiring fire magic as she issues a warning to the Duke. Although she admits her inability to break the curse, she accepts his invitation to stay at the mansion. Back at the mansion, the Duke introduces Cuff to Alice and explains their encounter. Alice scolds him for not heeding her warnings, but is touched by his efforts to find her earring. At dinner, Cuff unveils a unique truth about herself. She is a blend of both human and witch heritage. Sadly, she has faced rejection from both factions, but her decision to be with the Duke stems from his unwavering determination. The next morning, Viola visits the Duke's mansion to see Rob, whom she adores, and enjoys some sweets. At the table, Viola decides to test Alice's character and makes comments about her femininity and teaches her the Viola method to become a better maid. Surprisingly, the method works, and the Duke is smitten with Alice's newfound charm. Before leaving, Viola tries her charm on Rob, but her confidence crumbles. The following morning, Viola returns to the Duke's house to see Rob again. She finds the Duke and Alice in the kitchen, sharing a moment while eating stew. To change the subject, the Duke involves Viola and Rob in making dough for bread. Viola gets to spend time with Rob, but he kindly tells her that she is too young to be his wife. After a wholesome meal, Viola heads back while Rob gives her freshly baked bread for her journey. In the winter season, Alice and the Duke enjoy their time ice skating when they unexpectedly meet Zane, who happens to be Cuff's close friend. Zane reveals that he has been diligently searching for Cuff, but so far his efforts have been in vain. Fortunately, Alice comes across Cuff, who had accidentally fallen into the frozen lake. Amidst a heartwarming reunion, they all delightfully skate together on the ice. Later, Cuff convinces Zane to bring the Duke to the Witches' Sabbath, a gathering of witches during a blood moon. Before leaving, Cuff tells the Duke to be ready because he might find the one who cursed him. Right after, Alice convinces the Duke to take her with him to the Witches' Sabbath. Later that night, Viola knocks on Alice's door and reveals that the Duke won't let her spend the night with Rob, so now she will stay with Alice for the night. She then asks Viola about the dead flower she had preserved. In response, Alice states that it is one of her most prized possessions. Later, the two begin their girls-only party, and that's when Viola reveals that she has a huge crush on Rob. After living in the mansion for some time, the Duke has discovered rules about his curse. Anything he touches dies, and anything that touches him suffers the same fate. However, things can get close to him without activating the curse if they use inanimate objects or wear thick layers of clothing. While cleaning the conservatory room, the Duke thinks about Cuff and Kane's words, hoping to one day break the witch's curse. As the blood moon approaches, Cuff and Zane arrive at the Duke's mansion to take him to the Witches' Sabbath and provide special robes to conceal their presence. On the Sabbath, the Duke is surprised by the witches' laid-back culture. The leader of the group recognizes the Duke and his curse, explaining that the witch responsible for it is deceased. Unfortunately, she is unable to break the curse due to the witch's mastery of magic and advises the Duke to abandon his dream of breaking the curse. The next morning, Alice brings a talking magic pot to make a potion but keeps its purpose a secret, pretending to prepare stew instead. The Duke is puzzled by the strange ingredients she adds, like lizard tail and red clay soil. Finally, Alice reveals that the potion is meant to break curses. The hopeful Duke tries it, but his curse remains unaffected. He remembers the words of the witch's leader, warning him to give up on breaking the curse, but he refuses to do so and gives the magic pot to Rob. In the library, Alice finds a mysterious piece of music in a black notebook. Legend has it that playing it perfectly can break any curse. Determined to lift his curse, the Duke begins playing. During his performance, he sees the ghost of McFerrin, the song's producer, trying to distract him. Despite the ghost's efforts, the Duke remains steadfast. After the performance, the ghost vanishes and the Duke realizes that someone else performing the song perfectly will free McFerrin from his curse. The next morning, Cuff visits to learn her ABCs, hoping to impress Zane, but things are proving to be quite difficult. Meanwhile, at Viola's manor, her older brother Walter has become a teenage idol, but he's secretly anxious and seeks attention. He dislikes being referred to as second-born, a tactic Viola uses. She informs Walter that she'll be going to the Duke's mansion for lunch, but he warns her about their mother catching up to her shenanigans. At the mansion, Viola mistakes Cuff for a burglar, but soon learns the truth. That evening, the Duke extends an invitation to Alice for a game of chess, prompting him to reminisce about the day she first arrived. He felt a sense of frustration back then when Rob had hired a maid without his consent. However, Rob reminded the Duke of their childhood friendship as Alice, triggering memories from a troubled past that the Duke preferred not to dwell on. Despite Alice's earnest efforts to demonstrate her usefulness every day, the Duke responded with stubbornness, insisting that he wouldn't partake of any food until Alice had left premises. In the end, Alice showed the Duke her persistence as he challenged her to clean a dirty room in 3 days. She surprised him by completing it in one night. The Duke was moved by her hard work. With tears in his eyes, the Duke explains that the reason he shunned Alice was because she can do better things with her life than to waste it on a cursed brat, but Alice refuses the idea, stating that she has nowhere else to go and she would be grateful if the Duke would let her be his maid. As the festive season of Christmas unfolds, the Duke diligently makes arrangements for his much-anticipated party. At Viola's place, her mother tells her to stay home, but she decides to go out alone. Walter overhears her plans and switches places with Viola's driver to check on the cursed firstborn. Zane and Cuff bring a Christmas tree to the Duke's mansion, and they all start decorating it while Viola's mother gets angry due to their disappearance. Viola and Walter show up at the party while Walter thinks the Duke is still miserable and wonders why his curse hasn't been broken if he knows 2 witches. Walter reveals that he has always been treated as the Duke's replacement in case the Duke fails to break the curse. They all decide to compete for the title of family head, and the game is to uncover the truth about the Duke's curse. As the Christmas party commences, an air of jubilation fills the atmosphere and everyone joins in the festivities with joy. In the midst of night, Alice recalls the time she spent with her mother Sharon. She remembers the time they used to play hide and seek together in the Duke's main estate. Every morning, her mother would help out all the maids with their work while Alice used to play with the young Duke. The following day, Viola's mother is insanely angry at the two of them for missing Christmas. Meanwhile, Cuff goes out shopping alone on the advice of Viola. However, Zane is following her like a shadow. After visiting a few shops, Cuff buys all of her groceries. Suddenly, a boy tries to steal her money, but Cuff stops him in time. She then saves him for a fall, but in doing so, she drops all of her groceries. Just then, Zane reveals himself to help Cuff gather all her stuff and go home. At night, the Duke wanders around the mansion, struggling to sleep. To make him rest, Alice asks the Duke to sleep with her. While in bed, the Duke freaks out because the love of his life is sleeping right next to her. He tells Alice that unmarried couples sleeping together is a violation of their morals. Following a short conversation, the Duke expresses his desire to reside alongside his family and share meals with them at the dinner table. His reconciliation with his mother awaits only once he breaks the curse, as Walter believes she patiently anticipates his return. In due course, he plans to confide in her about his affection for Alice. Nevertheless, should she disapprove of their union, he's prepared to sever all ties with his family to marry Alice. Strangely though, Alice declines the Duke's proposition and insists he should never cut ties with his family. The next day, the Duke meets with Rob, and Duke shows off the pair of gloves Alice knitted for him. Later, Rob recalls the moment the Duke's mother told him to take care of him. However, raising a child was no easy feat. After 2 years, the Duke started to isolate himself and yearn for death. Rob realized that only someone of the Duke's age can save him from his misery, and that's when Rob recruited Alice for the job. He hoped that having Alice by his side might cheer the Duke. Luckily, his decision was right, and now the Duke has found something to live for. The following evening, Alice finds a servant's logbook of the Duke's old home. In that book, she finds something suspicious since her mother talked about Daleth, the leader of the Cuff, and Zane and another woman dressed in a white robe. However, Rob denies all knowledge of those records. Meanwhile, Zane drops by the mansion to give Alice a message from Daleth and tells Alice that Daleth wants to be friends with her, which means that Alice and the others should not interfere with witch business. Despite Daleth's revelations, Zane and Cuff still decide to help the Duke in breaking the curse. In the meantime, Zane secretly takes the notebook found by Alice to destroy it since he was threatened by Daleth to do so, but the Duke catches him red-handed. Suddenly, the situation shifts. Zane tells the Duke that Daleth has ordered him to destroy the logbook, which most probably contains crucial intel about the curse on the Duke. Notwithstanding these circumstances, Zane finds himself unable to decline Daleth's request, as she currently holds his childhood friend, Cuff, in captivity. After a brief discussion, Zane proceeds to burn the book, however, is overrun by conflicting thoughts. In the end, he hands the book over to the Duke and refuses to let Daleth have her way. On the other hand, the Duke tells Zane to burn the book because he understands the burden carried by Zane. He then assures him that he would have done the same thing if he were in his position. Later, Zane destroys the book using his unique magic while explaining that he can recreate any item with just a fragment of the original. After a few days, the Duke receives an invitation from his mother to visit her at the mansion. Right after, the Duke tells Alice that he had hoped to meet his mother after breaking his curse, but now he is unsure about the reason his mother summoned him to the mansion. Despite a snowstorm, the Duke and Alice embark on their journey. On their way, the Duke tells Alice that he only remembers playing the piano at the main estate, while Alice reveals that she only remembers the Duke. Upon arriving, the Duke's younger siblings welcome him to the mansion. They then escort the Duke to his mother's room, but after formalities, she postpones any meaningful conversation until the next day, while Alice meets with housemaids who were acquitted with her mother. In the dead of night, Alice comes face to face with the Duke's mother. Overwhelmed by the striking resemblance between Alice and Sharon, who happened to be Alice's own mother, she becomes visibly flustered. Another maid reveals that the Duke's mother was really close with Sharon, probably because of their similar interests. However, after her passing, the Duke's mother started acting strangely. In the meantime, Zane and Cuff make their way to the Duke's residence, but upon arrival, they find that he is nowhere to be found. The next morning, Viola takes the Duke to the grave where he was cursed. In that moment, the Duke recalls the fateful day and tells Viola that he was looking for a 4-leaf clover, and suddenly the area was covered by smoke. That's when a mysterious witch caught her from behind to curse him. During her journey back, Viola candidly shares her misery while residing in the mansion, expressing her conviction that the Duke would find greater contentment residing in the villa with Rob and Alice. The next evening at dinner, the Duke musters his courage and openly declares his love for Alice. Despite his mother initially dismissing it as a fleeting notion, the Duke remains resolute and earnestly emphasizes the depth of his feelings. He firmly asserts that he will marry Alice, emphasizing that his life and those of his siblings are not under his mother's control. Fueled by emotion, he leaves the mansion with Alice. Surprisingly, his mother watches him go with a smile, recognizing the significant growth and maturity her son has undergone. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing to the channel and stay tuned for more quality uploads.